Hey there, welcome back to Online Marketing Foundations. We're still in Module 2, Commit to Lead an Audience. Now, in this lesson, Lesson 6, we're going to talk about how you identify your core differentiators. This is about kind of something that is looking at differences that are more crucial to your business and to the way you do business and the way you go about serving clients. So the last couple of lessons, we've talked about kind of your strengths, and then we talked about your values. Well, now we're going into something which is equally important, which is how are you different in how you serve your clients specifically. So that's what this lesson is about. And what I'll tell you is you've got to nail this. If you want to lead an audience, you're going to have to really find your core differentiators and lean into them. So with that, let's dive in. As always, we're starting with the truth bomb, which is that if there's nothing different about the way you solve your customers' problems, there's no reason for someone to buy from you. In other words, if you are just doing things exactly the same as every other competitor out there, your solution is the same, no matter what it is. If you're a service provider or if you're a course creator and your course is exactly the same, if you just do things the same and there's nothing unique about you and the way that you're actually solving their problems specifically, the problem is there's really nothing that separates you from the crowd. And then you become a commodity. And kind of the only way you can compete is on price. Now, you can compete on some of the other stuff like your personality and all those things, but it's much harder. So what I'm going to tell you is this is what we're talking about, is finding that thing that's different about the way you solve your customers' problems. So that's what we're doing today in this lesson. Let's go ahead and kind of look at what we're going to learn. In this lesson, you're going to learn what a core differentiator is, why you need at least one of them, and the two-step process to identify your core differentiators. So starting off, what the heck is a core differentiator? Because I just want to make sure that you understand this concept. Really, it's just a fancy marketing term for the thing or things about your approach that sets you apart from the competition. It's kind of that thing that's different. And I want to be very clear here. You'll often hear people talk about find the things that are unique about your service. And I've read books about this or that have this element in it, and then they talk in platitudes. This is not about platitudes because everyone claims to provide exceptional service. Everyone claims to be served first. Everyone claims, all of these different things. Everybody claims that our product is exceptional and all that crap. None of that is an actual core differentiator because that's what everybody claims. And I want you to understand this. Everyone is going to claim these things that are platitudes. Now, it might actually be that in some ways your level of service is different. Like, for example, you say, if you had a thing where industry standard and most people are responding to, questions within 48 hours and you say, hey, we respond within an hour, right? That might be an actual differentiator, but it can't be this platitude statement of exceptional service because that kind of thing isn't actually something that makes you stand out. That's what makes you just like everybody else claiming the exact same thing in business platitudes. So stay away from those. A core differentiator is something that's truly unique about your views or approach to serving customers. Again, hopefully you picked up on that. There's two things there, your views or approach to serving customers. And we'll talk about the views in a second. This is not values like your core values. This is more specific, your views about like what your customers should be doing, for example. So we'll get into it in a second. But basically, we're talking about the things that make you weird as a business. Now, I'm not talking about you being personally weird about stuff unrelated, but things that make your approach very different and make you sound different from the other people who are offering the same general solution to your customers. So a quick note to help you understand, like core values, your core differentiators set you apart, but these are directly related to how you serve your audience. So it's kind of the direct relation that makes a core differentiator something that is different from your competitors. Like one of the core differentiators for me, like kind of early on when I was establishing my legal stuff business, is most people would package up, and the only way you got training was you would get training as part of a thing where you bought a paid program. And I broke off the training and said, look, the legal training I'm going to give you for free you're only going to have to pay me for the template. So that was kind of one thing that differentiated how I helped people. I gave them the training for free. So in some sense, that was a differentiator. And obviously it was a positive differentiator because people who weren't quite sure yet could come get the training for free. And then once I'd established that bond with them, obviously they were likely to buy from me. But that's like an example of how that is related to how I serve my audience, like on that particular thing. So that's kind of an example that might help you. Let's now talk about why you need at least one core differentiators. The simple fact is that core differentiators are what create your unique selling proposition. Now, if you've never heard of the concept of a unique selling proposition, it's something that in marketing and sales, you have to say, what is kind of that unique angle that you're going to take on why people should buy from you? And you have to come up with that. And if you think about it, like in some businesses, it's tough, right? Because it's a commodity business. It's like, well, hey, we sell trash bags, right? And so if someone sells trash bags, what is the unique selling proposition? That's tough, right? But in other businesses, it's more obvious. But in service industries, for example, when I was a lawyer working in law firms, you had to have a unique selling proposition of why people should pick you over the other law firms that provide service. And it's really about figuring out kind of what is this difference about, what are they going to get different when they hire you versus someone else? And so that's kind of the thing. And the difficulty you have is like if you're trying to do it based on platitudes, everybody has those and those don't help. So this is where a core differentiator comes in. And because what we're selling is information, products, and services, our unique approach is the reason for someone to buy from us. In other words, our unique or different approach to solving the problem, whether it's like, we teach a different way or we as a service provider do it in a different way, that is what makes us unique. That's what gives us our unique selling proposition. It's kind of the thing that makes us stand out. And one of the examples I always like to use is, why would I buy your Instagram course? Like if you're just teaching Instagram for online entrepreneurs, for example, I don't want to say how many because I don't even know how many there are. I could probably name off hundreds of people teaching a course for that. And so my point is, you've got to tell me, why should I pick you over all of those other people? What's different about your method, about what you're going to teach me, about how it's going to work for me? And there's got to be something in there that's actually unique to kind of set you apart. And that comes from your approach, etc. But I also want to be clear, this isn't just about the selling process and the sales process. Core differentiators are what actually make you stand out in the first place in a very noisy world. If you think about it, we are hearing a lot of people talk about a lot of different things in the online world. And it depends, whatever your area of expertise is, you can probably see this. Like, I tend to talk a lot about people who help entrepreneurs with business services because that's the space I live in. But if you think about it, health and fitness, there is tons of health and fitness people. If you think about any kind of space, there are tons of people, and people are being bombarded with different messages about that area, about what they need help with, about their problem. And we tend to become kind of blind to the message when it's all the same. So if there's nothing different about your approach, why should people listen to what you have to say? That's kind of the question you have to ask yourself. And if you're going to rely on, because I'm going to have really catchy ads, or I'm going to be really, that's, maybe going to do a little bit. But the problem is, that might grab someone's attention. But if it grabs their attention, but still it's just the exact same thing they're hearing from everybody else, it's not going to work. So again, I started to talk about fitness here, and this is the question. Why would someone listen to your fitness podcast, for example, if you wanted to create one, instead of the tens of thousands of other fitness podcasts out there? What is it about what you're going to tell me that's different? What is it about your message, about your approach that's actually going to grab my attention? Without a core differentiator, there's no reason for someone to follow you or buy from you. It's just the reality. You are going to be like lost in the noise. So many people who struggle. Now, this all relates to a lot of different things about niching and messaging and all that. But people who struggle are often, it's because literally they're trying to sell something that is exactly the same, and their process, everything is exactly the same as everybody else's, so they just get thrown in with the noise. And if that's the case, I'm just going to tell you, it gets to be very, very hard to stand out. And so you kind of get thrown into the mixer, and not a lot of good stuff happens there. So what you have to do is create a core, or not create, really find a core differentiator. But let me be honest, if you're literally just teaching the exact same stuff that everybody else is teaching, you're going to have trouble. Because remember, we're in the commit to lead phase. You can't lead if all you're doing is repackaging the same information that everyone else has, the same method that everyone else is teaching. That's not leading. And you will not find a path to success there. So you have to have a core differentiator. You have to have that thing that is different to give people a reason to actually kind of come into your world and follow your way of doing it. So that's the pitch for why you need it. Now let's talk about how to identify your core differentiators, because this is something people say, okay, great, I got to have a core differentiator. How do I figure out what that is? And I'm going to give you 2 questions to ask that may help. First, where do you think the conventional wisdom in your space is wrong? So like me, I would say, where do I believe the conventional wisdom in the online marketing space is wrong? And that's in this business I'm building now, which is, more on the business coaching side. I would ask that question and I would say, okay, what do I think is wrong? Where do I think that almost everybody is getting things wrong and doing things wrong and it's not serving them? Now, obviously, you've kind of figured out I do a lot of that, but that's one of the things that you can ask yourself. For example, it could be that, if you're a health and fitness person, you might say that, hey, people who are telling you that you have to go on a constricted diet are wrong, and here's why, right? And again, it's that kind of thing that, is the conventional wisdom, and you would be talking about that. So that's the first question you can ask. The next question is, how is your approach different? And this is like more in the weeds, like, well, everyone else, and this is not true anymore, but let's say in the old days, everyone else is focused on teaching people to post on Instagram, to do the posts on the feed. And I'm more focused on teaching people that they actually should lean into Instagram stories. Like that would be an example. And again, that's not a relevant example anymore because now everybody's teaching that. But it would be the kind of thing that at the time you're teaching something different and it actually gets people to see, this person knows what they're talking about. So that's kind of a quick example. But it could also be that, hey, like I'm saying, everybody is teaching you to get people in your world and sell. And I'm saying, no, don't do that. We have to actually do things before that. We have to commit to lead and we have to connect with our audience. We've got to do that before we're trying to sell. And so again, that's where my approach is different. Now, a lot of times these 2 questions, or the answers to these 2 questions, are related. Right? A lot of times your approach is different because you believe that the conventional wisdom is wrong. Because obviously the approach most people are teaching is based upon kind of the conventional way of doing things, the conventional beliefs about things. And so they will often come to the same, but not always. And so you can talk often about where beliefs are wrong, and then you can also talk about where the approach is wrong. So it's 2 different questions. But really kind of the easiest way to find core differentiators is just to identify where you believe most people are getting things wrong. And again, I'm going to give you a caveat here, but when you listen to the other kind of experts in your space talking, teaching, telling people what to do, what are the things that you listen to and you're like, oh yeah, that's just not right? And you've got to identify those things. And what I want you to get is, if you can't identify those things, you need to do some work. Because if you really want to build a long-term sustainable business, you're going to have to find those things that make you unique, that set you apart, that are different. And so you need to be thinking about those things. And so that's it. Now, once you figured those things out, look, pointing out mistakes in the orthodoxy in your niche is one of the fastest ways to get noticed. It's one of the ways that people are going to be like, ooh, this person's talking about something very different. Maybe I should listen, right? And so kind of it's something that is a different voice. And when there's a different voice, it will naturally tend to attract people. Now, an example, one of my core differentiators is I challenge the idea that online marketers should focus exclusively on what's called direct response marketing. Direct response marketing is basically the conversion. It's, I give you something and I tell you to immediately take an action, whether it's join my list or buy or sign up for this or whatever. A lot of the orthodoxy in the online space is that everything you should do, you should be able to measure the results and you should be able to say, okay, I did this and I got a 2% click rate and I did a this and I did a that. And I say that's not right. That's only one piece of the puzzle. As you know by now, I'm saying you got to build a brand, and building a brand is not something that you can actually measure that way. And so again, me saying that makes me very different from what most people are doing. And it's based in a different belief about how we should be marketing, but I can also talk about it in a very specific way. So for example, I once did a podcast episode, I think it was a live podcast episode, if I remember correctly, about how conversion copywriters are causing problems for people in email. And I said the problem is because most people who are teaching, email, and most people that have learned from those folks at some point or another are conversion copywriters. They're focused on getting people to convert. So people fixate on things like what percentage of my list clicked on the link in this email. And I said, that's the wrong approach. And so again, it's a way for me to create content that people are saying, oh, hey, well, I thought I was supposed to worry about my click-through rate on emails. Wait, he's saying I don't. Let me understand why he's saying that. And so again, it's just something that will get people's attention. So that's an example. But here's my caveat. Be careful not to personalize things. For a while, I kind of made this mistake. This is not about attacking people. It's not about saying, hey, those bozos are wrong and they're bad or anything like that. It's about challenging the ideas. And again, if you want to, I guess you could choose to attack people, but I don't think that's the best way to go because that can get old. But when you're talking about the ideas themselves, now look, some people who are advocating for those ideas may get mad at you. They may not like that you're challenging the idea and challenging the orthodoxy. But what I will tell you is that if they're mad about that, that's on them, not on you. You're just talking about ideas. You're helping people understand why your approach is better, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. So that's kind of the caveat here I want to give you is talk about ideas, not people, because candidly, we don't know why people are teaching what they're teaching. We don't know in their hearts. So let's not talk about them. Let's talk about the ideas themselves. Now, I've got to say this. Don't be a polarizing jerk. Some people have heard a message like this, but it's not actually delivered this way. And what they're saying is, oh, I'm supposed to be polarizing. So let me just go out and just disagree with stuff for the sake of disagreeing with stuff. That's not what you're doing here. What you're doing here is being honest and talking about the things that you honestly believe are being done wrong and why and how they should be done instead. So that's kind of the distinction here. You're not being polarizing for the sake of being polarizing. You're setting out what you believe the right way is and why it's different from what the general conventional wisdom is. And in the process, guess what? You become polarizing. But that's kind of that's like the effect, but that's not why you're doing it. That's not the goal, if you will. And so I want to be careful about that. Now, again, I would also say different ideas are great and kind of attacking and saying, hey, I don't believe in this idea, et cetera, is not great. But also find the things that you're doing differently than others. That's kind of where the real rubber meets the road. Again, I have lots of things in the way I teach. I don't launch, and I tell people I don't think launching is the best way. Again, that's very different than in this space. And when we get into Module 4, you'll see that it's not just that I'm saying evergreen launch versus live launch. It's something very different. And so I'm teaching people to do things differently and, because I'm doing things differently. So that's part of what it is. It's not just about ideas. It's about how does that go into action. And you want to kind of tie those things in because identifying how your approach is different creates a really clear distinguishing feature between you. And it really gives your audience a reason to listen to you and to buy. And I want to be clear. Some people are like, yeah, I don't like what you're saying. I like this other way. And that's fine. But at least you'll stand out and you will draw people to you who do resonate. I will just tell you, there's a lot of people who don't listen to me and who say, no, I disagree with you, Bobby. I want to launch. I want to use, scarcity and urgency and all those things. And I say, well, fine, you can do that. But what I do is I draw in the people, and first of all, I give them this thing that's different. So like, whoa. And people who have an open mind come and they listen to me, and some of them agree, and some of them say, yeah, you know what you're saying makes sense. And other people say, well, no, I still want to go this other way. And that's okay. But at least I have carved out a space for me where it's very clear of who would be interested in kind of being in my world and buying from me. And that's what you're trying to do with this. Again, you're not trying to lead the entire world. You're committing to lead a specific audience. And finding that thing that sets you apart is part of the process of finding the right audience that you're going to lead. So that's what you're having to do. So kind of the big takeaway, if you're just like everyone else, no one will have a reason to pay attention to you, much less buy your online products. So find and truly embrace what makes you different about the way you serve, the way you solve the problem. When you do that, when you find those core differentiators, things get very, very easy. And it's easy to get attention, and it's easy to make sales. So that was this lesson. Now in the next lesson, you're going to discover how to develop your core frameworks, which is an interesting way to kind of take the lesson that you got here and then kind of show people how your approach is different in a very memorable way. That's what we're going to be doing in the next lesson, and I'll see you there.